Good morning. Now you've had a bit of practice with the person who's introducing me. You should be doing better than this. So let's do this again. Good morning.
Good morning.
Right. And Ms. Leo, they're adding that, yes. All right. Let me say how delighted I am to be part of this forum, and I would like to congratulate the Community Foundation for doing this and for focusing on this particular aspect of education. As the first speaker said, everyone has been to school, and that is one of the challenges. Because everyone's been to school, it's sometimes hard to talk about this because everyone knows about this and there's nothing to learn. So that's a challenge every time we talk about education. What I want to do for the few minutes that I have today, and I do stress it's a few minutes, for a person who likes to talk as much as I like to talk, it's very hard to talk for 15 minutes. And as my mother would say, Enid, hush. So I'm going to try and do that for 15 minutes and then hush, thinking my mother saying that to me. What I want to do is focus on just the key aspects of what I hope we will frame our work today with regard to this question. And the very first one has to do with the responsibility that we have through No Child Left Behind. Every place that I speak in this country now, I say to the audiences, I would like us to think about where we are heading. When we say we want to leave no child behind, we must constantly ask ourselves, where are we taking them? What is our destination? You know, when you get onto a plane, they say, if you're not heading for Washington, D.C., you need to get off, right? So I am quite serious about this, that all our deliberations need to be focused, in my view, within a particular vision. And that's particularly relevant now because the way in which student learning and achievement are measured have to do with a single test score. And so I want us to be mindful and forever thoughtful of when we say we want to leave no child behind, let us ask where we are taking them. What is our destination? What should be our goal in the process of teaching? And of course, I won't just tell you let's suggest that you ask that. I'll tell you where I think we should go. I mean, of course, I have the mic for 15 minutes. It would be a missed opportunity. So I think that there are three elements to what should be the outcome of quality teaching. And these three elements are based on the work of people like Dr. Asa Hilliard and so forth. We need the element of schooling, which has to do with the mastery of skills and knowledge required for the current society to operate successfully within the context in which we live. And I would say that that is what is in mind most of the time when we think about quality teaching. But for me, it's not good enough. We also want, in addition to schooling, what Dr. Hilliard calls education, the ability to think critically about the society we are living in, and to ask questions about the missing pieces of information, and to critique the basis of inequality that we're in. And that needs to be part of it. And that can sometimes get forgotten as we head off to wherever we are heading off with the children and leaving none of them behind. And the third one has to do with socialization, which specifically speaks to the ability and the desire to build your community. Many of the students that we're talking about who are in an achievement gap belong to marginalized communities around class and race and so forth. And so a piece of what it seems to me must be part of whatever we do is the equipping of those students to lift up their communities, to transform them. So often, schooling has led many of the brightest students of color away from their community, where being successful in school means that you don't want to do anything with your people. And so I'm saying, I hope that's not where we're leading our children. Schooling, the skills that we need for the mainstream, education, which allows us to critique and make it more just. And thirdly, socialization, to build the societies that are yet on the margin and that are still waiting for justice. So that's the context in which I want to place these discussions about quality teaching. Having said that, where does race come into it? And I was delighted when I saw that there was a dialogue here called Putting Race on the Table. About 15 years ago, I started an initiative called Putting Race on the Table, coming out of a conversation with a teacher in Milwaukee who said, Enid, when we leave the workshops, we have race on the table, but when we get back to school, it gets under the table, and it's hard to get it back. So putting race on the table and keeping it there are essential, and I am really happy to have met my sisters and brothers who talk about putting race on the table, okay? And let me give you 5 very concrete ways in which race has to do with this question of closing the achievement gap and with quality teaching very quickly, and I'm looking at the time because I have to be fast. So clearly the issue of credentialism, and lots of research tell us that the proportion of faculty teaching without appropriate credentials is nearly 7 times greater in high minority schools than in low minority schools. That's just one statistic. And one particular issue that really is helpful, that gives you lots of the statistics, the educational leadership, this issue called in November 2004, called Closing the Achievement Gap. I would say every superintendent, every principal, every person should get a copy and read it from cover to cover. Well written, lots of excellent examples of the gap being closed, and all the statistics that I haven't got time to give you here. But credentialism is clearly one. Who teaches in what schools with what background? Then the question also of tracking, of where some of our students are heading and how they track from the earliest grades. Lanny Guinier talks about a school system in which we are tracking some children from kindergarten to college and some children from kindergarten to prison. And it's a color-coded tracking. Again, that data is available to you. Questions of teacher expectations. How much we demand of students, who we think will learn. Curriculum content, whole pieces of human history missing. But let me speak about 2 particularly that don't get talked about. Professional development. What does race have to do with professional development? Well, one of the things that's connected with it is what is it people take up and learn about in professional development has to do with issues of race. I would say the fact that so few teachers have been prepared through professional development, pre-service, in-service, and all the rest, to deal with the issue of language, particularly language as it relates to the experience of African American students in this district and others, to me is an indication of race. But let me tell you exactly what I mean. We have at least 35 to 40 years of research by people like Geneva Smitherman and others who talk about the implications of Ebonics and varieties of Ebonics, the language spoken by some groups of African Americans, and what that has to do with learning, and what that has to do with reading, and what that has to do with writing. And many teachers in schools where large numbers of students speak varieties of Ebonics at home have no knowledge of how one would approach that in a thoughtful and pedagogically sound way. And that is why I say it has to do with race, because my contention is that the reason why we haven't bothered with it, it has to do with who the speakers are. It has to do with the status of the group. And so I'm throwing this challenge out to this group that we need to take a look at who knows what about the home language of some groups of African American students. And the work is being done in places that shows that when teachers know how to embrace that language, know what the features are, know how to do what is called contrastive analysis, which helps students to know this is how you say it in this context, and this is how you say it in that context, and you don't use words like correct or bad English, and you use words like code switch and translate, you have very different results. The material is there, the videos are there to show how teachers can do this, and what's important, the gaps are closing when teachers take that approach. If people want to know more about that, I'd be happy to say more. But I just want to say it's questions of race that actually have to do with what we learn about in the process of professional development. And then the other thing to do, of course, has to do with the quality of teaching. This conversation is about teacher quality, but I want to change it to quality of teaching. And the reason is that teacher quality can lead us to simply blame and belittle teachers. What I hope we're about is building up, making sure that we develop the skills, the knowledge, and the wherewithal within teachers. And so quality teaching is really the issue. Very quickly, an example from one of my visits to a district. I was asked by a district outside, a small district in California, to come in and tell them why the gap wasn't closing. Now, of course, if I knew offhand, I wouldn't be doing this, lowly work, just walking around. But anyway, they had spent, I would say, a good amount of money, 3 years' worth of professional development on closing the gap. And the gap was between Asian and white students at the top, Latino and African American students at the bottom. And 3 years, the gap hadn't closed. So they said to me, come in, talk to us, talk to our leadership team and tell us why we're not closing the gap. Well, I would never do anything so foolhardy. I said to them, I need to visit the classrooms. Pick 9 classrooms, and then I will tell you what's going on. Some people from the central office took it upon themselves to come with me. I don't know what they thought I was going to do, but they decided to come, which was fine. After 3 classrooms, we didn't have to say anything else, because it was clear by the quality of teaching within the room with the African American and Latino students why the gap wasn't closing. We saw 2 excellent classes of excellent teaching. There were no African American and Latino students in those classes. The Asian and white students were in those classes. And so I said to them, should I bother come to the meeting, or have you got the answer? So my point is that when we put race on the table, it is directly linked to the quality of teaching that different groups of students of different skin color get in different places. Of course, the answer is not hard, because what we have to do is go in and make sure that the quality of teaching at that end happens here. So it's easy if we put our minds to it.